as a stuttering. When I went through Dad's classes, he was usually more specific than that. And in the classes, he described it as the girl being in hysterics. And I'm of the opinion that the more elaborate description is more accurate and that he was being gentle in the book. Regardless, it was a success and a failure. It was a success in that she went into hypnosis very quickly and very deeply. It was a success in that once she was in hypnosis, the stuttering and the hysteria totally stopped and she was calm. But Jake had not yet learned how to give a proper post-hypnotic suggestion. So when he emerged her, hell broke loose.
And she stuttered again.
Yep. So he reinduced her and she was calm. And then he emerged her again. And after this had gone on 2 or 3 times, Jake and my father left. And in Jake's mind, well, I guess hypnosis doesn't work.
And Dave's mind, at a 6-year-old, he definitely thought it did not work.
Did I say Dave or did I say Jake?
You said Jake.
I'm sorry.
No problem.
In Dave's mind, it didn't work. Jake's wondering, what do I need to learn more to make it work? Dave's saying it doesn't work. 2 years later, Jake comes down with cancer. He's in severe pain. He knows he's going to die of it because of the lack of any proper treatment in that time frame and that place. And he's in severe pain. When one of the hypnotists, the guy who's taught him most of what he knows, comes over and gives him hypnotic pain relief. And Dave, seeing the sudden change from hypnotic pain relief, decides, oh, I was wrong. Hypnosis can work. I just don't know enough about when it does and when it doesn't. Jake demise. By the way, my belief, Dad didn't cover this in class, but I'm certain of it. I'm certain that hypnotist also taught Jake self-hypnosis. The reason I'm certain of that is the morning after the hypnotic treatment that worked on Jake, Jake got up and got on a long-distance train trip to collect from people who owed his store money and were far away. For him to be able to get on the train and go means not only that the pain had been cured the night before, but he must have had self-hypnosis pain relief. It doesn't work any other way. At any rate, Jake dies on the train home, doesn't quite make it home. And so Dave is left with this knowledge that it can work, but without understanding the whole thing. And when they're breaking up Jake's possessions, which of the kids will fit into which of his clothes, et cetera, et cetera. Dave, at that point, about 8.5 years old, says, I want Jake's entire hypnosis library. I just want the books. I don't want anything else. Nobody else in the family wants them, and he gets this set of books. And my father begins teaching himself hypnosis to learn the things Jake hadn't yet gotten to. One of those books was Hippolyte Bernheim's
Suggestive
Therapeutics, which is an extremely difficult book to read. I know, because I'm still struggling through it. My father, at 8.5 years old, begins reading it. And by 12 years old, he is a good enough hypnotist to put people into somnambulism and to become the local hypnotist when the vaudeville people aren't there. And he proceeds to be a hypnotist until, as a teenager, his girlfriend's father says, you will stop hypnotizing. I'm afraid you'll do something to my daughter.
So as a result, he had a sucky sex life. But I want to go back for 1 minute. So when he was learning, when Dave Elman was learning and teaching himself the hypnosis, Hippolyte Bernheim had talked about how every time you went to the hypnotist and you went into hypnosis, you went in deeper and faster. And so Dave started thinking about, well, why would you go this week and then come back next week and then come back the next week? And that's how he slowly started developing his idea of the Dave Elman induction. Now, we used to call it the DEI. Lately, I'm calling it the Dave Elman induction because DEI in the United States has taken on a whole new meaning. So, Dave Elman induction, with all its process steps, he brought that idea of instead of doing progressive muscle relaxation and going real slow, he was able to slowly bring a time period of getting into somnambulism down to 3 to 4 minutes, and that was by having them bringing them out, taking them back in, bringing them out, taking them back in. He called it 3 trips to Bernheim, but we call it today fractionation. Okay, but he called it 3 trips to Bernheim. And he called the DEI at the time, or Dave Elman induction, he called that the 3 minute routine. And so that's how slowly but surely it got faster and faster, which became very instrumental in stage hypnosis and also became very instrumental on how he ended up doing the medical course later on. Back to your story.
Okay. Well, he runs. Sometimes there's a kid who'll say, "Well, my father was like that," except he'd say, "Join." So at about age 16, he splits off and goes and joins vaudeville. He quickly finds out that he knows more hypnotic theory than any of the hypnotists and any of the vaudeville troupes he runs into. But he's done less actual inductions, and he's therefore a bit sloppy by comparison. So he makes a deal with them. I'll teach you the theory if you teach me the tricks. And within a year or so, he is well known within the hypnotic world as a really good hypnotist, and he begins developing things. One of the big problems of that time frame was what they called the hypnotic coma. Today we call it the Esdale state. The problem with that particular thing was when somebody enters the hypnotic coma, they stop obeying the hypnotist and they remain in it and cannot be emerged easily. When that would happen in the Old West, the hypnotist would say to the theater owner, "Oh, just put him backstage, make him comfortable. We'll come back in the morning and we'll feed him a good breakfast of ham and eggs." And at that point, unfortunately, the local sheriff would step up and say, "Son, you may expect that, but your ham and eggs going to be served in the county jail. So we're sure you're here if he doesn't come out of it himself." So hypnotists were scared of this. The last thing they wanted was a night in the county jail. Now, all of them were busily trying all sorts of different emergencies. One of these has got to work. None of them worked. My father watched this and thought, "Wait a minute." And he'd go to each of them to say, "Do you still have the name and address of the person who was in the hypnotic coma a couple of cities ago?" "Yeah." "Let me have that. I want to talk to her." And he went and he talked to several people who had been in the hypnotic coma. And he found, interestingly enough, they all had the same answer. It was the reason they didn't come out is it was so pleasant that all they wanted was for the hypnotist to go away and leave me alone. So they ignored the hypnotist. Aha. And Dad gets a bright idea from that. The next time he runs into a hypnotic coma, he says, if you don't come out when I count 2, 3, 5, whatever he picked, when I finish counting to where I'm counting to, I will fix it so you can never enjoy hypnosis again for the rest of your life. And he'd count them. Bingo, they'd come out. Why? The reason they were in was they were ignoring the hypnotist because it was so pleasant. The hypnotist threatens the pleasantness of it. They come out. So my father developed the first of the hypnotic coma or Esdale emergencies. If you look at the emergencies used for that state today, you will find components of it that are simply my father's method made a little bit gentler and a little bit more acceptable to the modern mind. But it's the same emergence. The result was my father was suddenly told his name was going to be up on the marquee as the lead hypnotist. But the problem was David Kopelman is longer than the marquee. So David Kopelman gets shortened to Dave Elman. That's how my father's name evolved, and that's how my father was a significant force in stage hypnosis. Now, along comes a thing called a reliable, cheap movie projector. See, the original movie projectors were a pain in the butt to make work or highly unreliable, which is why very few movie theaters, because you had to have a specialist running the doggone projector.
And they were very expensive.
Along comes a cheap, effective, easy to run one by Eastman Kodak. And bingo, the vaudeville theaters convert into movie theaters. And the result was vaudeville went broke. My father was in New York when that happened. And when that happened, he's suddenly out of a job. He doesn't dare say he's a hypnotist because at that time, for reasons that I've not been able to pin down, but I'm sure of, at that time, the New York Police Department had orders to arrest anybody claiming to be a hypnotist because there had apparently been some frauds or something under it. Dad didn't dare call himself a hypnotist. So he gets other jobs, primarily in show business. He spends some time writing jazz and blues music for W.C. Handy, does well enough at it so Handy does something he did for very few of his authors and composers. He allows the thing to be published with Dad actually having his name on the copyright. That's unusual. I have the sheet music from a couple of those songs, including Atlanta Blues. While Dad is working for W.C. Handy, he's going out to lunch or coming back from lunch, I don't remember which, with a good friend, and they're passing through one of these revolving doors in New York skyscrapers. And as they're going through it, two young ladies are coming out in the other direction. And he goes like that to the guy next to him, points to one of the two ladies, says, I'm going to marry that woman. Because you haven't even met her yet. The way she carries herself, I'm sure she's smart, I'm sure she's this, I'm sure she's that. So he spends the next month or two trying to find ways to have W.C. Handy's operation have to communicate with this other firm, whatever it was, so that he carries messages back and forth. And that's how he meets Pauline. That's my mother. Well, Pauline turns out to be everything that Dad predicted. And 5 years later, they get married and they have some children, the latest of whom is me. Dad still has not allowed Pauline or any of his in-laws to know he was a hypnotist.
Actually, You're the only one that knew it, but you didn't know that you knew it. His dad used it was an avid reader, and Larry has 23 bookcases in the house. And Dave also had a huge library. So he would pay Larry a nickel a shelf to dust the books. And I wish I had somebody for a nickel a shelf to do our books. And what Larry figured out was one of the shelves, there was the books, and then there was another set of books behind it. So he would just dust them, not even realizing, put them back all where they belong. And he would just charge Dave, he would charge his dad 10 cents instead of 5 cents for that shelf. So he didn't know it, but that was the hidden hypnosis library.
Yeah, that's where Hippolyte Bernheim and a bunch of others were, which shows up later. But at any rate, Hobby Lobby, his radio program, goes off the air, and Dad has to go back to being a stage hypnotist. A group of medical doctors, an entire committee, comes up to him after one of the shows and says, Mr. Elfman, we want you to teach medical hypnosis. My father says, I'm not a doctor. I don't know medicine. Go get somebody else. And they said, no, you don't understand. All of us, everybody on the committee has been through hypnosis schools. And all of us have learned things that we're sure are wrong because hypnosis doesn't work for us in a medical situation, yet we know it can. So we'll tell you what our problem is. We've watched your shows. You get people into somnambulism in under 3 minutes, sometimes even under 2. We've been told that takes 40 minutes or longer. We've watched the people come up on stage. You get between 95 and 100% of them induced immediately. Hypnosis schools say only 40% of humanity can be hypnotized at all. You give a post-hypnotic suggestion, it takes. They won't even try it because it always fails. We need a post-hypnotic that is as reliable as the prescription script we write to go to the drugstore. If you can teach us those 3 things, you convert hypnosis from a stage item to a medical tool. And they discuss it. My father's reluctant. Finally, he says, I'll make you a deal. I'll teach you those 3 things, but you teach me where you would use that in medicine so that when I'm up on the podium trying to teach a class, I'm not a complete oaf. I know what it is you're trying to do. Okay, we teach you, you teach us. Remember, I discussed my father teaching the other stage hypnotists in return for them teaching him? Same deal. Only in this case, it's with the doctors. I was in what I believe was his 3rd class, which was approximately a year later, by which time he's considered an expert throughout the area we taught in, which was New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania. And he's got amazing doctors who think of him almost as a god because they're able to use hypnosis medically. And I went through that class.
How old were you?
I was not quite 12. I was 11 and a half. So I've been a hypnotist for 75 years now.
Yeah. So let's go back
I
for a
left
minute.
wait a minute, I left the thing out. Remember I said that he had never allowed any of his in-laws to know he was a hypnotist? One of the last shows of Hobby Lobby, he had a stage hypnotist on the show on the radio. And this was a hypnotist who'd been on before, was usually pretty good. For some reason, half the people on the stage couldn't be induced. The ones who could be kept not following instructions. The post-hypnotics didn't take. My father steps up to the man and says, "You've done such a good job. I wonder if they'd even take suggestions from me." And the guy says, "The next voice you hear will be Dave Elmans and do whatever he says." And he runs off stage. And Dad starts in. I didn't recognize it until years later, but what I'm watching is my father's old time vaudeville act. He's going right to his old time vaudeville act. He does a good hypnosis act. Everything goes well. And at the end of it, we go to pick up the car at the garage, and we're standing there, and my mother suddenly puts her hands on her hips and leans to one side. And when she gets in that position, any of her kids, both my brothers and me, and any of my cousins know when Pauline gets into that position, all hell's about to break loose. She gets in that position. She says, "So, Dave, how is it that you know more about hypnosis than the hypnotist?" And I'm standing there watching her say that. And that's when my father first told Pauline he was a hypnotist.
So a couple of more things. I wanted to go back to Hobby Lobby. So how did Hobby Lobby come about? Um, Larry had an older brother he never got to meet, and he got sick and he passed away. And his parents were so deeply grieving that their uncle, one of the uncles, came and said, "Look, you need to do something to bring yourself out of this grief." And Dave, and he goes, "I don't know what to do." And he goes, "Well, I think you need to create a radio program that's so different than anything else out there." So, um, and so they came up with the idea of Hobby Lobby. And Hobby Lobby was actually a radio program where people came on with different hobbies. One of them was boxing kangaroos, one was eggs that laid different color eggs, hens that laid different color eggs, um, collecting buttons, frying an egg on dry ice. So there were all different kinds of things. Oh, that with dry ice, she froze cranberries and then used them as bullets, and they went right through things. So all different kinds of things that would come up, and he would have people from all over writing in about their unusual. One guy, back before computers and personal computers, I was in the printing business. Everybody would get stationery printed. And this guy would go into people's offices and gather stationery from other companies. And then he'd write to people on their stationery. Very bizarre. I mean, they would be some really unusual things. But what was so interesting about, and while they came up with that idea, the Dave said, "Well, that's good. That's good for my grief. What are we going to do for Pauline?" And the uncle said, "Just get her pregnant." So this is the fetus that came from that thought. So they were going to call, his dad wanted to call him Hobby Lobby, and they didn't. His mother said, Pauline did one of those, "Over my dead body." And so they gave him the initials for HL, which was Hobby Lobby. And they named him something with H, which he refuses to let people know. But I'm going to tell you now, if you listen to the recordings on our site on Hobby Lobby, the lady comes on week 2 after his birth and announces his birth with his full name. So if you want it, you have to listen. So he's H. Lawrence or Larry Elman. I didn't even know the H part until we were getting our marriage certificate in Florida almost 24 years ago. And there we were online, and I said, "Who's this person?" He goes, "Me." So I had no idea he wasn't Larry, totally. Anyway, so they developed this program. Now, why is this so relevant to hypnosis? Well, think about it. There's a studio audience that is listening and watching the people that are on the radio. So there's a studio audience, and they're seeing these hobbies. They're seeing what was fascinating on the stage. But the radio audience out there has no, it's not like video like you and I have right now. they couldn't see anything. So how was it a popular program for 13 years nationwide? And there were people every week that would go and listen to the broadcast. Dave Elman became so good that as he was watching things, he was reflecting to everybody out there almost simultaneously what was happening on the stage, and they got to feel and visualize what was happening. So that was so handy when it came to teaching hypnosis because there they were visualizing. So that helped to hone his skills, which were later used in medical hypnosis. So everything, when people say, oh, I'm new at hypnosis, there's no such thing as a newbie. All the different skills you've had before in different careers, in different times of your life, those skills come with you. And the only newbie that exists is when you're first born, and they have nothing there. Otherwise, you're bringing all these experiences, communication skills, all these things that you have done and experienced in your lifetime, you're bringing into hypnosis. So there's no such thing as a newbie. You're always learning. We're always learning. And we've been hypnotized our whole life by parents, teachers, advertisements, and you also have done hypnosis with friends, family, children, not even knowing that you were doing it. What is it? It's great suggestion, isn't it? So going back to Hobby Lobby, there was another thing in Hobby Lobby that was interesting is that same hypnotist that at one time they put 20 people in a sound booth because the radio was very, very particular about what if people get hypnotized, on the radio audience. Maybe they're driving, maybe they're doing something not a good idea. Even when I go on a podcast, I let people know if I'm going to do something hypnotic, you might want to turn this down for a minute, etc. So you want to be careful. But so this guy was up in an airplane, and there were, I think, 20 people in a sound booth in the studio. And from the airplane, now this is back in the 1950s, possibly, oh no, 1940s. Right. So he's up in an airplane, 1940s, and he hypnotizes the people in the studio audience, in the studio in that sound booth. So meanwhile, the show's going on, and Dave is letting him know, yeah, he's up there hypnotizing those people. And so nobody got to hear the induction.
But I got to hear the suggestions.
Right. So afterwards, he brought them out on the stage and they gave him some suggestions. And it was like a stage show. So, and that was done from the air. So that was sort of interesting. It was very interesting. So that was Hobby Lobby. And going to the medical hypnosis, one more?
One more on that. Today, Hobby Lobby is a chain of handicraft stores.
Yeah.
They stole our name, literally stole it. And the founder of that outfit wrote an autobiography in which he said, the thought of that for a name for a handicraft store came when I was at, and he gives the name of the Air Force Base, the month, etc., etc., etc. I was the duty officer who was to inspect his barracks, and he was out of line and had to be arrested. And as he's being arrested, he turns to one of the other guys in there and says, who in the F is that lieutenant who just arrested me? And the other guy, using the nickname everybody used behind my back, except I always considered it a compliment because it reflected on my father. He says, oh, that's Lieutenant Hobby Lobby Elman. That's how he got the name, but he doesn't say that in his book. He just gives the date and place. And I read this in his book, and I'm ready to, angry because he has stolen the name, and we are not getting anything from it, although he has violated all of our
It was trademarked at the
copyrights
time.
and trademarks and everything else.
But back then, there was constantly, when they were on the air and stuff, there would be constantly little companies, hobby shops that would open up called Hobby Lobby. And of course, they'd take them to court, they'd win, and that shop would just close up and move somewhere else and open up as
It'd
another shop.
wrap around the corner and open up as Jones's Handicrafts, and in small letters below it, formerly Hobby Lobby of whatever the name of the town was.
Right. So they stopped pursuing it after a while. So going to the medical hypnosis, remember Larry was talking about how Dave came up with how to emerge from Esdale state or the hypnotic coma? Well, Pauline, so first of all, they were partners. Like Larry and I teach together. We were traveling together before we went into
The
hypnosis.
smartest thing I ever did was proposing to marry her.
You never know. You go shopping at Office Depot, you never know who you're going to meet. So that's where we met. Okay, so we were, so I forgot where I was going with that. Give me a minute. Help.
Medical
Larry.
hypnosis.
Yeah, but medical hypnosis.
What
Oh, okay.
came
So
up with
Pauline and Dave would travel together all the time, just like Larry and I did. And she worked with him as partners in Hobby Lobby, and they worked together in the medical hypnosis, and they would travel. They would actually teach 10 weeks, and they would go in a circle. So on Mondays, they were in this town. On Tuesdays, they were in this town, and they were doctors and dentists. So it would always be in the evening they would teach, and then they would travel to the next one. Well, so Pauline became a very good hypnotist, and she was also a very good teacher. So she was sitting one day and she said, Dave, I know how you could put them into the hypnotic coma. He goes, how do you know that? She goes, I've been watching you all these years and I know. And so she's the one that came up with how to put them into, at least for them and how they worked, how he could put them into Esdale. Because before that, it would just happen. He didn't know how to get them that deep that they would go. So she was very much part of that. And the other thing is they would practice, right? And so they would learn, and then they'd line up sometimes to demonstrate something to Dave. And Pauline would also. Dave looked one day, and his short line was this short, and Pauline's line was this long, and he said, "What? Why are you guys all over there? Why don't you come over here?" And he goes, "Well, you're a good lecturer, but she's a really good teacher." And so they were lined up to demonstrate to her. So they taught together, and they would travel and meet with the dentist. And that circle, eventually, the last time they taught, they were all the way out on the West Coast. Now they started on the East Coast in the New York, New Jersey area, and that circle would sometimes go double the circle, would be 2 weeks. So it would be one every 2 weeks they'd be at a different, back to the same city. And so and then they have had, of course, when we learn as hypnotists, and if you don't have a practice and you don't have people coming regularly, you have to go looking for people to practice. Well, they had full doctor and dental schedules, so they got to work so much during the week on their patients that they would come back with all sorts of suggestions and developments. And so really the course was a culmination of the doctor's field testing and coming up with things. So it metamorphosized over the years. The last circles they did, Dave had a heart attack in 1962 in California. So it had worked its way all the way out to the West Coast, and so that was interesting. Yes.
one of the examples, what she was just leading up to, just as Dave had encouraged the doctors to teach him, what do you need? He'd also tell the doctors, if you come up with a new item that's useful to everybody, tell it to the class. We'll field test it among all the doctors in the class. And if it's good, it'll go into the next edition of our notes to doctors. So there was a pediatrician by the name of Farrell, Dr. Farrell, in Cincinnati, Ohio. Now, in those days, no longer happens, but in those days, every doctor would have a large jar of rubbing alcohol in his examining room. And if he had to give an injection or do any of a number of other things, he'd take a cotton ball, dip it in there, and then clean the skin in the area that he was going to have to work on. Dr. Farrell dropped a bit of blue dye into his large medicine jar of rubbing alcohol. He's a pediatrician. In comes a little kid. The kid's scared silly because the kid knows he's going to get an injection this particular trip. And Farrell would say, "See that jar? A new thing we just got from France. You use anything out of that jar, it immediately makes that entire area numb. So you can't feel a thing. Watch." And he'd then take a ball of cotton and he'd rub on the skin. He'd say, "That whole thing is totally numb." He'd give the injection. The kid wouldn't feel a thing. And he'd say, "The magic thing about it, though, is the way the French did it, you can take your hand and you can move that numbness to wherever else you need it. Right now it's there. That was fine for the injection. But if you skin your leg tomorrow, just go like this and move the numbness down onto your leg and you won't feel a thing." And he referred to it as the magic spot. The rest of the doctors looked at him like, "You're nuts." He said, "No, it'll work. I've tried it. I'm doing the sort of suggestion that Mr. Elman has just taught you about waking hypnosis and about suggestion and how to word things. Just do it the way I just said, it'll work." So the doctors in the class started doing exactly that. And it worked on everybody. Then one day, Dr. Farrell came in several classes later and said, "Got some bad news for you, gentlemen. There's a problem with the magic spot." "What's the problem?" "I arrived at the office today and there was a line totally around my entire building. All of the parents of kids who have a magic spot are coming in. They want a magic spot too."
So, don't you all wish you had potion to give yourself a magic spot? Okay. So I just wanted to I don't know how much more time we have. Give me a 2 minutes,
About 10 minutes.
10 minutes. Okay. So what is it about Dave Elman's methods, besides being a fast and true induction that works very successfully? What is it about his methods? Well, he was very client-centered. I know some things it's always reading scripts, but one script does not fit everybody. For Dave, his methods became very client-centered. He would work with what the clients gave him. He also worked with direct suggestion. Now, some people think, well, especially they read the book and the direct suggestions, they think he's being authoritative, whereas Dr. Erickson was more permissive in his storytelling. But if you listen to his recordings, his suggestion could be very direct, but it's not in authoritative manner in how you say it. So it's not necessarily authoritative, it's direct. So Larry usually like draws this little quadrant thing, and authoritative being all the way up here and permissive being all the way down here and direct and indirect. Well, Erickson was maybe a little more to the indirect and permissive, but not all the way down at the bottom. I mean, they were both sort of mid-range and used a combination. So if somebody tells you that Dave Ellman is authoritative, not really. He's definitely does direct suggestions, though. And if you get to listen to some of his audio recordings, and one of the things we're doing for you guys today is we don't generally have uh, it advertised, but there are Dave Ellman recordings, audio recordings. Unfortunately, there's no video. It's all audio, but that was of the time. But it's not listed everywhere because of some family matters. But we have them, and we are offering you guys a special access to it. Not only the access, but also you get 20% off. So if you would like to learn from Dave directly and hearing his stories, and a lot of the book came from transcripts from his courses because he recorded them, and it's written around it. But the book is 330 pages. The Dave Ellman induction takes up about 30 pages of it. So there's so much to be learned from Dave Ellman besides the Ellman induction. And lots of times people are using Dave Ellman methods and don't even realize it because they just get, sort of into people's courses, which is fine. And we are not, you're using our material. We're not like that. Yes, please use it. Please share it. That's part of what we do. Where our legacy is to keep his stuff going forward. So if you would like to learn directly from Dave Ellman, there's about 15 hours of audio on our Dave Ellman audio vault. And that link is b.link b.link/DE audio. And that would put you right there with the discount and everything. So I recommend, because there's some really great stories to listen to. So if you go back to the discussion of Dave watching at 6 years old, this stuttering case and how it didn't work. Well, on that audio, there's at least 2, if not 3, stuttering cases that you watch how he gets to the root of the cause through his regression to cause, and how he reframes it and how they do come up and they're no longer stuttering. You had a 56-year-old man who stuttered. He was 59. He started stuttering at something that happened at 3 years old. And for 56 years, he'd been stuttering so bad. He had a job, but it was all working independently by himself because of the social interactions would make his stuttering that much worse. So how in the classroom, and where did he get the people to work on? He would always have the doctors and dentists bring patients, bring their nurse, bring their wives or girlfriends, so that they had people to work on, that not just each other every week. So so this man, after 56 years, had this cathartic, is that the correct word, reaction, and he cried, he just sobbed it all out, and he came out and he was no longer stuttering. So it was so interesting to listen to, because just 5 of those hours are all hypnoanalysis from his hypnoanalysis recording set. So if you've never gotten to hear Dave Ellman, it's worth listening to. So that's the audio. So that's his direct suggestions. Now, another reason he was so successful in the medical hypnosis course is you had these doctors. Now, back then, doctors, you had the same doctor. Many people had the same doctor their whole lives. Today, with insurance changes and groups, you end up having to change doctors more often than you did back then. Back then, and there was no MedMD, WebMD, and there were no sources. Today you have a question, you Google it. Doesn't mean it's always the right answer, but you can have at least 10 answers right there in 3 minutes. And back then you didn't have that stuff, and so their doctor was their information. So often the doctor would be up on this pedestal. So here's this doctor going to learn from this guy named Dave Elman. And if that he must be really, really smart, really great, because their doctor is going there. And so they're going with them. So they're already coming in with the expectation that this guy is great, and so they watch it, and they watch people go into hypnosis, and sometimes it's as a matter of close your eyes and they already go there. So that's why, if you as a hypnotist have an expectation of yourself that you will hypnotize them, yeah, I'll try to hypnotize you. No, I'm going to hypnotize you. That's a difference. You're not going to try, you're going to do it. So if you have confidence in yourself, you're going to give your client confidence in the process and in you, and the fact that they could easily go into hypnosis. So I think that's one of the things that made him very successful. And I, and one other thing, we've done 3 conferences, and Justine has spoken at all of them. Trish just spoke at the last one, and we were doing Zoom conferences where we were doing 3 days, 12 hours a day in 3 rooms with the Dave Elman Cafe. Well, I was a little tired. I'm 72 years old, and this year I said, I'm not doing a conference this year, because I actually did about 90% of putting it together. And Trish, I know, just did one. I know that was a lot of work putting it together, or it's coming up, I think. And Justine, you're seeing the culmination of what she's done. Fabulous. Good job. And so this year I'm doing several times a month. We're having guests in the Elman Cafe. So I think that the best part of going to conferences was getting together for lunch or at the bar and things, and networking and getting to visit with each other and getting to exchange ideas. So whenever we have somebody in the Elman Cafe, there's a presentation, and then people can stay. Sometimes there's breakout rooms, sometimes they're just chatting about things and visit with each other. So the last one, we have another present for you. The last one that just happened was a man named Cormac Colleran from Ireland, who has developed a really good technique of working with cocaine addicts. Do you guys have many cocaine addicts in New Zealand? Is that yay? No? Yeah? Okay. In between. So,
Lots of
but
drugs.
say that again?
Lots of different drugs.
So this works for any kind of it. He has a process that works great with addictions and stuff. And he talked about hypnosis for cocaine addiction. And so it's an hour and a half presentation. It was really good and has some good techniques in there. So we are giving you that as a gift. We're also doing a 2-day course that I'm sponsoring with him in May, end of May, beginning of June. And so if anybody's interested in attending that, it's a Zoom course. But also on this gift, this thing I'm sending you, Sheila Granger is going to be presenting coming up on weight. And I don't have the title in front of me at the moment, but I know Justine's will give it to you, and it'll be on that sheet. And that is on March 29th at 11 o'clock our time, which is, I think, 6 o'clock in the morning your time, which is a little early. But at the same time, if you don't make it, if you sign up, you get the recording. So I want to give that to you guys as a gift. And I made it also easy, b.link/cocaine. So if you're interested in that, all the links are on there. Don't you love that Blink? If you don't have a Blink, it's so easy to come up with names. I did it in 3 seconds right before. So b.link/cocaine, and you'll get the free presentation, and you could sign up for Sheila Granger's thing on weight. And I'm hoping that you guys can come to more of the cafes. Hopefully Justine will be there in a few months. Trish, we need to connect. I would like you to present in there. So it's been a lot of fun. I'm trying to do, yeah, that's good. We'll connect. So anybody, this has been great. What's that? Are you giving her a little? Okay. We're,
Awesome. That's
what's
That's
that? 1 minute?
that's Trish being naughty.
Oh, hi, Trish. You're just being Trish.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Cheryl and Larry. You guys are amazing.
Thank you. Obviously, we're not at our place. We're in a hotel in upstate New York, going to now visit our grandchildren. So thank you.
Primarily because our granddaughter is going to be the star of the show at a play we're going to tomorrow night.
So,
It runs in the family.
yeah. Thank you
Oh.
very much. Thank you all. Have a great conference. It's been a pleasure. And anybody want to contact us, elmanhypnosis.com. We look forward to getting to know you, and Justine can invite us back where we could see you guys too, smaller groups. Bye.
Cool. Thank you. See you later.
Thank you. Bye-bye.